The summer we found the tracks. I was 12 the summer we found the tracks that weren't supposed to exist, and I've been trying to forget them for 37 years. But some things don't want to be forgotten. Some things follow you home, even when you're old enough to know that monsters aren't real and that your best friends from childhood are supposed to fade into Facebook acquaintances who occasionally like your photos of barbecues and graduations. Except Tommy Garrett never made it to Facebook. He never made it past 13. And every July, when the heat shimmers off the asphalt and the cicadas scream their 17-year prophecies, I dream about those tracks cutting through the Oregon woods, leading to nowhere, coming from nothing, and the thing we found walking along them that looked like Tommy but wasn't. Not anymore. There were 4 of us that summer. Me, Eddie Brennan, the fat kid who read too many comics, Tommy Garrett, the natural leader with a smile that could charm teachers and a right hook that could flatten 8th graders, Marcus Roach Rodriguez, skinny as a railroad spike and twice as tough, and Peter Huang, who everyone called Professor because he wore glasses and actually liked school. We were the kind of friends you can only be at 12, before girls become more than a vague annoyance, before you realize your parents are fallible, before you understand that some adventures end with someone not coming home. It started with a story Tommy's older brother Dean told us while we sat in their garage, passing around a warm beer Dean had given us to share. 1 beer, 4 kids, pretending the bitter taste didn't make us want to gag.
You know about the vanishing train, right?
Dean said, working on his motorcycle, grease under his fingernails like permanent shadow. We didn't, but we leaned in anyway.
Back in 1952, a whole freight train disappeared between Millerville and Cedar Falls. 37 cars full of cattle bound for slaughter. Just vanished, never arrived, never found. But here's the thing.
He paused, wrench in hand, making sure he had our attention.
The tracks it was running on, they got torn up in 1948, 4 years before the train disappeared, Kuar.
Bullshit,
Roach said, brave behind the beer. Dean shrugged.
My buddy Craig says he found them, the impossible tracks, says they appear sometimes cutting through the woods near Skeleton Ridge, says if you follow them far enough you can hear the train, still running, still full of cattle, still trying to reach the slaughterhouse.
That was all it took. 4 boys, 1 story, and a summer stretching ahead of us like an unwalked road. We set out 3 days later, our backpacks full of supplies pilfered from our mother's pantries, Wonder Bread sandwiches, warm Cokes, bags of chips that would be crushed within an hour. Tommy had his brother's compass. I had my dad's old flashlight, heavy as a club. The professor had a map he'd drawn based on Dean's vague directions and his own research at the library. Roach had his grandfather's switchblade, which he wasn't supposed to touch, but carried everywhere, anyway. The hike to Skeleton Ridge took most of the morning. We followed the old logging road until it petered out into deer paths, then pushed through the underbrush, thorns catching our clothes, leaving thin lines of blood on our arms like the woods were taking samples.
This is stupid,
the professor said around noon, adjusting his glasses, which kept fogging in the humidity.
Trains can't run on tracks that don't exist.
Your mom can't run on tracks that don't exist,
Roach shot back, which didn't make sense, but made us laugh anyway, that 12-year-old humor that finds brilliance in nonsense. It was Tommy who saw them first. He'd climbed up on a fallen tree to get his bearings, and suddenly he was frozen, staring into the middle distance like he'd seen God or the devil or something in between.
Guys,
he said, and his voice had changed. Gone was the bravado, the leader's confidence.
Guys, holy shit.
We scrambled up beside him, and there they were, railroad tracks cutting through the forest like a wound. But wrong. Everything about them was wrong. The metal was too dark, almost black, and it didn't reflect the sunlight filtering through the canopy. The wooden ties were pale as bone, and they weren't evenly spaced. Some were too close together, others separated by gaps that hurt to look at, as if distance itself was broken around them. But the worst part was the smell. Have you ever smelled old blood? Not fresh blood. That's copper, and heat. Old blood smells like iron and rot and something sweet, like flowers left too long in a vase. That's what the tracks smelled like,
We should go back.
the professor whispered.
We should follow them.
Tommy said, already sliding down from the tree. That was Tommy. Never met a dare he wouldn't take, a risk he wouldn't run. It would have made him either very successful or very dead as an adult. We never found out which. We followed the tracks for maybe an hour, walking single file beside them. Nobody wanted to actually step on them. They hummed, a low vibration you felt in your teeth more than heard with your ears. The woods grew quieter the farther we went. No birds, no insects, even our footsteps seemed muffled. The trees changed too. At first, it was subtle, a branch growing at an odd angle, leaves that were just slightly the wrong shade of green. But the deeper we went, the more wrong everything became. Trees with bark that looked like it was inside out, leaves that flickered between green and black when you weren't looking directly at them, and always that smell, getting stronger.
Look,
Roach pointed ahead.
is that a station?
It was. An old wooden platform, the kind you see in westerns, but like everything else here, it was wrong. The wood was that same bone-pale color as the railroad ties, and the sign hanging from the roof was in no language I'd ever seen. Symbols that made your eyes water if you stared too long. On the platform was a bench. On the bench was a suitcase. The suitcase was moving. Not moving like something was pushing it, moving like something inside was trying to get out,
Don't.
I said as Tommy approached it. But Tommy was already reaching for the latches. The suitcase opened with a sound like a sigh, and inside were clothes. A child's clothes, folded neatly, the kind kids wore in the 1950s. Short pants, suspenders, a little cap. And beneath the clothes, pressed flat like flowers in a book, was the child. I don't mean a body. I mean a child. Somehow compressed to 2 dimensions but still animate, still aware. Its paper-thin hand reached up toward us, and its mouth, a horizontal line now, opened in a silent scream. Tommy slammed the suitcase shut and stumbled backward. We all did. But when he backed up, his foot hit the rail. The hum stopped. The silence was worse than the noise had been. It was the silence of held breath, of a predator that spotted prey, of the moment before everything goes wrong. Then we heard the train whistle. It came from both directions at once, which should have been impossible. A sound like cattle screaming, like metal tearing, like every nightmare you've ever had about being chased. And beneath it, getting louder, the click-clack of wheels on tracks that shouldn't exist.
Run!
Tommy said. We ran. But the professor tripped. Of course someone tripped. Someone always trips in stories like this. His glasses flew off, and when he scrambled for them, his hand landed on the track. The change was instant. His hand sank into the metal like it was tar, and he screamed. God, I can still hear that scream. We grabbed him, all 3 of us, pulling, and his hand came free with a wet sound that made me vomit right there in the pine needles. But his hand was different now. The fingers were too long, with too many joints, and the fingernails were on the wrong side. The train whistle came again, closer. We could see it now. 2 trains, one from each direction, both made of that same dark metal, windows lit from inside with a light that wasn't quite fire. And in those windows, pressed against the glass, were cattle. Except their eyes were human, and they were looking at us, and they recognized us.
The woods!
Tommy shouted.
Get off the tracks!
We crashed into the underbrush, dragging the professor, who was sobbing and cradling his transformed hand. Behind us, the trains met where we'd been standing, and the sound they made. Imagine 2 mirrors shattering into each other, except the mirrors are the size of buildings and made of screaming. We ran until we couldn't, then walked until we couldn't, then crawled until we found the logging road. The professor's hand was getting worse. The fingers now reached his elbow, growing like vines, and tiny mouths were opening along their length, whispering in that same language from the station sign.
We have to get help.
I said.
No hospital's gonna know what to do with that.
Roach said, and he was right. It was Tommy who made the decision. Tommy, who took Roach's grandfather's knife. Tommy, who held the professor down while Roach and I held his arms. Tommy, who cut where the wrongness met the normal flesh, just below the elbow. The professor passed out, which was a mercy. We used our shirts to stop the bleeding, then took turns carrying him back to town. We left him at the hospital emergency room door, rang the bell, and ran. We were cowards, but we were 12. 12-year-olds are supposed to be cowards when faced with things like that. The official story was that Peter Huang had been injured in an illegal trap set by poachers. He lived, became a lefty, went to college, became an actual professor. We never talked about what really happened. There was nothing to say, but that wasn't the end. 3 nights later, Tommy called me at 2 a.m. His voice was strange, distant, like he was calling from the bottom of a well.
Eddie,
He said,
I can hear it.
Hear what?
The train. It followed me home. It's in my walls, Eddie, in the pipes. Listen.
I heard it then, through the phone, that click-clack rhythm, that cattle scream whistle.
I'm coming over.
I said,
Number it wants me to go back. It says I have a ticket. Says I've always had a ticket. My name's on the suitcase now, Eddie. The one on the platform. It showed me in my dreams.
Tommy,
Tell Dean I'm sorry about his compass. Tell my mom I love her. Tell Roach he was the bravest of us. Tell the professor.
the line went dead. They found Tommy's body by the regular railroad tracks that run through Millerville, the ones that have been there since the 1920s and still get used twice a day for freight. He'd been hit by a train, they said. Tragic accident, they said. Closed casket, they said. But I went to Skeleton Ridge the day after his funeral, alone, which was stupid. But grief makes you stupid. The impossible tracks were gone. So was the station. But on the ground where the platform had been was the suitcase. Inside were Tommy's clothes, folded neatly, and beneath them, pressed flat but still moving, still trying to scream, was something that had Tommy's face, but too many eyes. I burned it. Right there in the woods, I doused that thing in lighter fluid I'd brought for that purpose and burned it until there was nothing left but ash that smelled like iron and rotten flowers. I don't know if it helped. I don't know if Tommy's wherever people go when they die, or if he's still on that train that runs on impossible tracks, carrying cattle with human eyes to a slaughterhouse that doesn't exist. But I know this. Roach died in a train accident in 2003, walking along tracks in Denver where he'd moved for work. The professor, Dr. Peter Huang now, called me last month to say he's been having dreams about his missing hand, about how it's still growing somewhere, still whispering, calling him back. And me? Every July, when the heat makes the air shimmer like it did that summer, I hear it. The click-clack of wheels on tracks, the whistle that sounds like screaming. And sometimes, late at night, my phone rings. The caller ID shows Tommy's name, even though that's impossible, even though his family disconnected that number decades ago. I never answer. I'm afraid of what I might hear. I'm afraid he might tell me I have a ticket too. We all got on those tracks that day. And maybe, in ways we don't understand, we never really got off. Maybe those tracks run through time itself, through the spaces between what's real and what shouldn't be. And once you've walked beside them, you're always walking beside them, even when you think you're safe in your suburban home with your wife and kids and your normal life that feels more like a dream than that summer ever did. Last week, my 13-year-old son asked if he and his friends could go camping at Skeleton Ridge. Said they'd heard a story about an old train that you can sometimes hear in the woods. I said no. I didn't explain why. How could I? But that night, I went to the garage and dug out the box I'd hidden when we first moved here. Inside was my dad's old flashlight, heavy as a club, dark stains on its handle from where I'd gripped it so tight that day my fingernails drew blood. Beneath it was a map, drawn in the professor's careful hand, showing the way to tracks that don't exist. And at the bottom, wrapped in a shirt that still smells faintly of iron and dead flowers, is a railroad spike. Not one from those impossible tracks. I would never have taken anything from there. This is from the regular tracks where they found Tommy, the place where one world touched another and my best friend fell through the gap. I keep it as a reminder of that summer, of the boys we were, of the man Tommy never got to become, and of the truth I learned at 12 and have spent decades trying to forget. There are tracks that run through this world that shouldn't exist, trains that carry cargo that used to be human, stations where suitcases hold flattened children who still blink, still breathe, still silently beg for help that will never come. And sometimes, on hot July nights when the cicadas scream and the air shimmers with heat, those tracks appear again, waiting, patient, knowing that everyone who's walked beside them carries a ticket they don't remember receiving to a destination they'll never understand, on a train that's always on time and never, ever late. Tommy was the first of us to punch that ticket. He won't be the last. The phone is ringing now as I write this. The caller ID says it's Tommy again. This time, God help me, this time, I think I'm going to answer because I'm tired of running from that summer, tired of pretending those tracks don't exist, tired of carrying this weight alone. And because, if I'm honest, part of me has been waiting to board that train since the day we found it. Part of me never left those woods. Part of me is still 12, still running, still hearing my best friend's voice echoing through telephone lines that shouldn't be able to carry calls from the dead. The phone is still ringing. Tommy's still waiting. The train, I think, is getting closer. I can hear its whistle now, clear as day, even though the nearest tracks are 3 miles away. It sounds like cattle screaming. It sounds like children crying. It sounds like summer ending, like innocence dying, like 4 boys who went into the woods and only 3 who really came out. I'm going to answer the phone now. If someone finds this, if I don't come back, stay away from Skeleton Ridge. Stay away from tracks that smell like iron and old blood. Stay away from trains that run on rails that shouldn't exist. And if you hear a whistle in the night that sounds like screaming, if you find a suitcase that moves on its own, if your best friend calls you from a number that's been disconnected for decades, don't answer. Don't ever answer. The ringing has stopped, but I can hear breathing on the other end of the line I haven't picked up yet. Breathing that sounds like it's coming through water, through earth, through 37 years of silence. Eddie, the voice says, and it is Tommy's voice, but also the sound of train wheels on impossible tracks.
Eddie, I've been waiting so long. We're all here. Everyone who ever walked the tracks. Everyone who ever heard the whistle. Your ticket's ready, Eddie. It's always been ready.
Tommy,
It doesn't hurt.
he says, and I can hear the lie in it, can hear decades of hurt in every word.
It doesn't hurt once you stop fighting it. Once you accept that some tracks only run one way. That some trains only have one stop.
I'm not coming, Tommy.
You don't have a choice, Eddie. None of us did. The tracks chose us the moment we found them. Or maybe they chose us before that. Maybe they were always waiting for 4 boys stupid enough to go looking for impossible things.
The whistle sounds again, so loud now it's coming from inside my house, inside my walls, inside my bones.
It's time to go, Eddie.
Tommy.
It says,
Time to find out what's at the end of the tracks.
I stand up. I don't want to, but my body moves anyway, like it's on rails, like every choice I've made since that summer has been leading to this moment. The door opens before I touch it. The night outside smells like iron and rotten flowers. And there, cutting through my suburban lawn, through the life I built to forget that summer, are the tracks. The impossible tracks, with their two dark rails and bone-white ties. The train is waiting. It's made of shadows and screams and the summer of 1986. In the engineer's window, I see Tommy. He's 13 forever, but his eyes are older than the world.
All aboard.
He says, and his voice carries on the wind that shouldn't be blowing, under stars that are all wrong.
Last call for the slaughterhouse. Last call for nowhere. Last call for boys who went looking for death and found it dressed up like adventure.
I step toward the tracks. Each step is a memory. Tommy's laugh, Roach's bravado, the professor's scream, the weight of my dad's flashlight, the taste of warm beer, the last good summer before everything went wrong. My foot touches the rail. The metal is warm, like skin, like something alive. And I remember what Tommy said all those years ago when Dean first told us the story.
We should follow them.
We should have known that some things once followed, follow back. We should have known that some tracks only run in circles, through time and memory and the spaces between what is and what should never be. We should have stayed home that summer. But 12-year-old boys don't stay home. They go looking for stories to tell, for adventures to survive, for impossible things to find. Sometimes they find them. Sometimes the impossible things find them back. The train whistle screams one last time, and I step aboard, into the smell of cattle and fear and 1952, into whatever waited for Tommy, into the end of every story about boys who go into the woods and come back changed, or don't come back at all. Behind me, my house fades like a dream I once had about being normal, about growing up, about surviving that summer. Ahead, the tracks curve into darkness, into forever, into the place where every lost thing goes to scream.
Welcome aboard.
Tommy says, and his smile has too many teeth.
I told you everyone has a ticket.
The train lurches forward, and I finally understand. We were never looking for the vanishing train. It was always looking for us.